Dinosa Silva, and I'm the chair of the Teaching, Learning, Scholarship, Knowledge Community here at NAFSA. Welcome to today's event. We're so happy you could join us. Today's event is part of a series of virtual events being hosted by the TLSKC this year. The next event will be held on August 25th, so mark your calendar and get excited for that. I'm joined today by others from TLSKC team, including Dr. Ellie Hutt, TLSKC's Research and Scholarship Coordinator, Patricia Gibson, a member of the TLSKC's Research and Scholarship Subcommittee, Dr. Meredith Henderson, the past chair of TLSKC, Dr. Kate Hellman, the chair-elect of the TLSKC, and many thanks also to Dr. Shauna Zobert, the Associate Director of the Research and Scholarship, and Dr. Dale, the Senior Director of Academic and Affairs Internationalization at NAFSA, for providing administrative support, tech support, anything you can think about, for providing all the support we need for this session and being TLSKC amazing staff partners. I now invite my colleague, Dr. Hutt, to talk more about today's event.
Hi, thanks so much, Dilnoza. So welcome, everyone. We're here today to talk about how to take your ideas for writing and research in international education and share them more widely with others, share them with the public. So getting published can take a variety of different forms. And we're very lucky today to have a wonderful panel of authors and editors who are going to share their experiences. And if you haven't already done so, I'd welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're logging in from today and what brought you to the session today. So each year, the Teaching, Learning and Scholarship Knowledge Community works with the editor of the Global Studies Literature Review, or the GSLR, to develop a publication which is connected to the NAFSA annual conference theme each year, with the aim of driving conversations forward connected to the theme of the conference. So the GSLR is a collection of book reviews and critical essays, and these bring awareness of new resources and important perspectives to consider connected to the conference theme. And the goal of that really is so that the conversations around the theme don't have to end when the conference does. And so I'd now like to pass over to my co-moderator for today's session, Melissa Watley, who is the editor of the GSLR.
Hi, everyone. So welcome to this event. It's good to see so many people here. As Ellie mentioned, I'm Dr. Melissa Watley. I'm an assistant professor of higher education at William & Mary, and I'm also the editor of the Global Studies Literature Review. So this event that we're at today is intended to highlight the connection between research and practice. And I do want to mention here at the beginning that we are currently accepting idea submissions for the next issue, the 2027 issue of the Global Studies Literature Review. The theme for this issue is collaborating to build a future-ready community. And you can find more details on the NAFSA website. If you have not already, please, I recommend that everyone download the latest issue of the Global Studies Literature Review. The theme for this issue was Crafting International Education for the Unpredictable. It's available now through NAFSA's online bookstore, and it is free. So you just log into your account and act as if you're going to purchase it, and you're able to download a PDF of the full thing. You've got the link in the chat there. This issue contains a critical essay and 6 thoughtful book reviews to help international educators review, reimagine, and revise ideas and practices in the field. And several of the authors of those publications are with us today, so you'll be able to ask them questions about their experiences and learn from their expertise. We're also joined by members of NAFSA staff who can help answer questions for you. You can learn more about everyone on NAFSA's website, but I do also want to take a few minutes here for everyone to introduce themselves. So we're going to popcorn this around.
Hi, everyone. My name is Becca Abu Rakia Einhorn, and I am the director of the U.S. State Department's Critical Language Scholarship Program, and I work at American Councils for International Education. And I am going to popcorn it to Michael.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Lanford, an associate professor of higher education at the University of North Georgia, where I teach classes primarily in organizational theory, qualitative research methods, and globalization, which is roughly where my research interests align as well. And I'm going to send this to Rakvendra.
Thank you, Dr. Lanford, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Brock Singh. I'm the Associate Director of International Recruitment at Indiana University, Bloomington. Also a doctoral student currently with the University of North Georgia in the Higher Education Leadership Practice Program. In my day-to-day work with Indiana University, Bloomington, I primarily focus on international admissions and recruitment. So definitely many of the perspectives I'll share will come from that point of view. And I will invite Samantha. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Samantha Nissen, and I'm the Senior Director of Global Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Roberta Buffett Institute for Global Affairs at Northwestern University. And we are broadly focused on programs that support research and teaching about the world beyond the United States. So yeah, such a pleasure to be here. And I think, Gareth, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Samantha. Yeah, I'm Gareth Bentall. I'm the Associate Director of Publishing Services here at NAFSA, and I help publish our books, ebooks, booklets, digital downloads, and International Educator magazine.
Great. Thank you all for these introductions. I believe we've got everyone. Someone please yell at me if we don't. But I'm not hearing anything. I'm going to move into our first question for our panelists. And this time, Samantha, I'm going to start with you since you are now first on my screen. You've all jumped around as you've been introducing yourselves. So can you summarize a key takeaway from what you wrote in your piece for this latest issue of the Global Studies Literature Review, and give us a bit of an idea of what readers should look out for?
Fantastic. So I wrote a book review of a book called Climate Justice and the University by Jenny Stevens. And the biggest takeaway here is it's essentially a provocation, really calling on universities to move beyond thinking about sustainability and these sort of like discrete, siloed initiatives at the university, and really rethink the university itself and what we consider as priorities and our responsibilities to truly advance climate justice at the university. And then as someone who is a practitioner myself, really tried to focus on the connections of international education and climate justice and those tensions that we hold, especially with mobility and international research collaborations. Yeah, so that's a little bit to entice you. It was very fun to work on. Look forward to talking about it a bit more.
Great, thank you. Rod, could I ask you to go next?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to provide some perspective in the critical essay, and that was focused on the equity-minded mentoring for international students. I mean, I think personally for me, as someone who came to the United States as an international student, I feel like this is kind of a pivotal moment. With so much kind of, constantly, changing in terms of immigration regulations and other things, that sometimes, it's important to take that kind of pause and think about, how do we support our students beyond just those regulations? While certainly, from a regulation perspective, it's absolutely important to help our students and make sure they're following those, updating and constantly evolving regulations. I think it's also important to sort of take that perspective on, how can we sort of support our students from a psychological perspective? How can we support them in their career goals, through our alumni connections? And I think that equity-minded mentoring certainly sort of provides that much needed conversation and thinking, which certainly in these challenging times is an important conversation. So I was really glad that Dr. Lanford was able to sort of bring me and some of my colleagues into that conversation.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And just as a note for our audience, that this was a co-authored piece, and Bragg and Michael were both co-authors on this essay that's in the issue. Michael, is there anything there that you would like to add?
I mean, Rock did a fantastic job, I think, of summarizing our piece. The only thing I'll kind of maybe suggest is One thing about this essay is that we want to make it clear this isn't a critique of current international admissions or support people who are doing so much to try and support students every day. More than anything, it was it was a cautionary tale because deficit-oriented language, I've noticed, has started to creep into some of the day-to-day conversations of faculty that I know, other people working in administration, just because they see international students struggling so much and may not know where it's coming from. So I think one thing in the essay that's happening that we wanted to kind of, encourage is, to the extent we can, build as much of a relationship with your international students as you possibly can right now, because you don't know what their experiences are like unless you really get to know them. And there's a good chance that they're going to need a web of support from a variety of different places because their experiences are so diverse and so unique in some cases.
Thank you. This essay was particularly timely for this issue. Becca, can you share a bit about your piece?
Yeah, thank you. I spent a lot of the early years of my career thinking that I was going to be a social entrepreneur. And I think I ultimately became more of a social entrepreneur. But because I was trying to, I don't know, get into that field, I ended up engaging a lot with design thinking, which is an approach developed in the consumer product field, but it shows up a lot in social enterprise conversations. So design thinking is a structured approach to problem solving. And I think the best way to describe it is that it's designing for the people who are using your product or your service. In this case, I send students abroad. And then really focusing on your end user and their experience, and then how that changes how you design. But the structured approach, it's a step-by-step process to work you through problem solving. And one of the best things is that it forces you to see uncertainty, to see problems as opportunities. So I think that ties in really well to what Michael was just talking about with deficit thinking. This is a lot of the opposite, right? This is like avoiding deficit thinking. Our field requires constant problem solving, and often that is in response to new problems where there's no clear precedent. I send hundreds of students abroad every summer, and I always joke that like every year brings some new student case that we've never had before. We absolutely don't have a case study on it. And so I think the design thinking is especially helpful for our field. So my piece reviews a book called Design Thinking in Student Affairs, a primer, by Gavin Henning, Julia Allworth, and Leslie D'Souza. So this book explains how design thinking, again, originally developed for like how you create a product, can be integrated or applied to higher education broadly. And my article is about why international educators should bring this approach more intentionally into our own work. And the key takeaway is that design thinking gives us practical tools for working through uncertainty. It slows us down before we jump to solutions, helps us question our assumptions. Sometimes we don't even realize they're assumptions. We think they're facts. It helps us listen closely to the people who are affected, and it generates a wider range of possible answers, and allows it, like, helps us test things before they're finished. Usually in academia, we reward people for like giving us the final product, and we don't want to see it till we have the final product. This is like intentionally we support like design thinking rewards we call it a scrappy prototype. That's the language that we use, a scrappy prototype. So as readers engage with my article, I hope you'll look for ways for why this mindset is particularly well suited to our field, and maybe some concrete ways we can start to apply it.
Great. Thank you. So thank you to all of our authors who are joining us here today. It's nice to have representation from both submission types so that you can answer potential questions from our audience members. Ellie, I'm turning it over to you for our next question.
Thanks, Melissa. So our next question is for you, Gareth. So as the Associate Director for Publishing Services at NAFSA, can you just tell us a little bit about what your role involves, the types of NAFSA publications that you work with, and how those publications provide opportunities for both practitioners and scholars, excuse me, to contribute to the field?
Yeah, so my role primarily is guiding our books, our ebooks, our digital publications through the publishing process and then selling it through NAFSA. Um, One thing that um, is really great about our program is that we are not just addressing an academic audience, right, but a very much a practitioner audience. So if you have, some idea, that started off in like a scholarly journal, that you want to kind of reshape for folks to implement, next semester, that's what we're here for. And so I definitely encourage people to. Uh, Reach out to us, with their the product proposals. We have some proposal templates, such as like a book proposal or a booklet proposal that'll be in a resource kit for folks who attended this virtual panel that'll be sent along. Um, yeah, definitely reach out. Um, we have a lot of opportunities here for publishing all kinds of content.
Great, thank you so much.
So the next question we have is for our authors here. So beyond the Global Studies Literature Review, what other outlets have you published with? Where do you find you look for information? How do you decide what outlet you want to publish with? And Rag, I'm going to start with you for this question.
Thank you. So I would say most recently I've had the opportunity to publish some op-ed commentary pieces with University World News. In the past, I've written similar sort of, opinion articles with Inside Higher Ed. I had a couple of chapters published last year. One with the Association for International Enrollment Management, and they had a collaboration with Star Scholars, again, sort of focusing on the international enrollment management as a field in itself. And then, of course, a couple of years back, a chapter with a book by Routledge that kind of focused on student education agents in international higher ed. So I had a few opportunities, I would say, both sort of focusing on the commentary pieces, but also some which got into the more sort of, the chapter focused or academic side, I would say a little bit. A lot of times it's interesting, I obviously am well connected in terms of a lot of folks in the international higher ed side, both faculty, but also practitioners. And in LinkedIn, honestly, has been a wonderful source to get to see the different area of opportunities that one may have, whether it's often sometimes chapter proposals or sometimes opportunities, perhaps even to, write for other online publications as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Gareth, would you mind sharing a bit of your perspective from the NAFSA publication side?
Absolutely. So, when we are determining if something is, something that we'd like to publish, we think about mainly the audience, right? So this is something that, I really encourage folks who are looking to publish with us is to consider their audience. Is this for practitioners? Are you just kind of sharing your personal experience, and like kind of commiserating? Then, I would say the International Educator magazine is great for that. A lot of personal stories, are published there. With our books and our digital downloads, those are more practitioner focused and more practical information, right? So if you have something that you published in an academic journal, you have that nugget of an idea and you really just, kind of want to reframe that in a new way, then that's where we can step in and help you out with that. And we can, at that point, it's really just the challenge of tweaking the language a bit.
Great, thank you. And Michael, would you mind sharing some of your thoughts as well?
Sure. I'll just share a couple of things in terms of if for those of you who are looking to publish in peer-reviewed journals, definitely make sure you look at the aims and scope of the journal. See if what you want to write about or what you've already prepared fits that journal really well in terms of that. If you have questions, you can look the last couple of issues, see recent articles that have been published. Look specifically at like how much weight do they give to theory generally? How much weight do they seem to give to methodology? And do you seem to have an article that aligns with those types of proportions? And one thing I would also encourage is there are human beings behind the authorship of these articles. I know that when people reach out to me and have a question about something I've published, I'm more than happy to send an email back, especially if it's a nice, quickly focused email. And you can reach out to recent, authors of some of these journals and ask them about their experiences. Because another thing that's kind of part of the hidden curriculum of some journals is some of them really strive for a quick turnaround, and then others may take a couple of years. And you kind of know for yourself what the turnaround time for what you want to publish needs to be. So those are at least a few other considerations to think about in the peer-reviewed journal space.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add a bit to those responses before passing things along to Ellie again. I want to highlight some journals that I often think of to feature my own work. So the Journal of Studies in International Education is a journal that I publish in quite frequently, and I'm seeing that Patricia put in the chat a link about how NAFSA members now have free access to the Journal of Studies in International Education. So make sure you check that out if you're a NAFSA member. I'll also add, Higher Education is another journal that focuses a lot of work in the international and comparative education sphere. There's also general higher education journals, so journals like the Journal of Higher Education or Research in Higher Education. Those are journals that will sometimes publish international education focused work. And then a bit of shameless self-promotion. I'll also mention two journals that I'm involved in from an editorial side. The Journal of Global Higher Education. Michael is also one of our associate editors for that journal. It's a brand new journal that I started with a few colleagues a couple of years ago. We are an open access journal that prioritizes critical perspectives of the field. And so I would encourage you all to check that out. And then I've also worked with the Critical Internationalization Studies Review for several years now. I mentioned this last journal, the Critical Internationalization Studies Review, because it is not a traditional academic journal. We focus short essays about research and practice and critical perspectives. Samantha has recently published a piece with us. So if you've got questions about that, I'm sure she'd be glad to answer them. But those are other spaces where work along the lines of what's represented here in this panel and in international education can appear. All right, and with that, Ellie, I'm turning it back over to you.
Yes, thanks. So this next question I'm going to direct to Samantha and Becca, although any of the rest of you can then also chime in with your viewpoints. So the question is, can you tell us a bit about how you initially decide on a topic for research and writing, and any experiences or recommendations from the publication process?
Great, thank you. And I'll answer this in a few different ways, and really, yeah, totally happy in the Q&A section if there's any threads that people are particularly interested in. For the article that I already introduced, the book review for this issue, I will say the reason I came to that topic about climate justice and the university is at Northwestern, I run a program where students, they go to sites of global environmental governance, and they conduct research abroad. So it's going to those United Nations climate change conferences you might have seen covered in the news, and just holding those tensions in my own work of getting students to really critically think about climate justice while also sending them abroad to do this data, and like, how do you reconcile and hold those things? And so I've been wanting to read more about how other people do that. And I've had the book like on my list that I had never quite gotten to, and just seeing the call for this issue, it gave me an excuse and a deadline to read the book, which I really appreciated. So I think selecting a topic that is really connected to my work and deepens the work that I do in my job was really super helpful. And then Melissa also mentioned a practitioner brief that I wrote for Critical Internationalization Studies Review. And so for that one, I last year finished my doctorate program, and I'm working on a longer empirical research project about academic freedom in international higher education. And as someone who also has a full-time staff job, it can feel very slow going. And so being able to work on that practitioner brief helped me kind of work out and get something out, some ideas out earlier, and start to engage with other people working in this space, continuing conversations from a conference before that journal piece is hopefully published one day in, as Michael said, maybe many years. And so it was really nice. And also it was quite short. So again, kind of looking at the projects that I'm working on, things that I have the energy and capacity to want to pursue, and just trying to find how these opportunities dovetail instead of it kind of feeling like an additional thing I'm doing. It's really supporting the main areas of my work.
Can I just add to that? Thanks for sharing how you came to your topics. But do you have any experiences to share from the process of trying to get published?
Yeah, with the process, I again have to say thank you to Melissa being a great editor and helping shepherd through. I think as someone who is a practitioner first, it can be just really intimidating. And so it's been really wonderful for me to engage in different professional associations, and just get like a lay of the land and see like, again, who's the author behind these pieces, who's on the editorial board, who's friendly, what kind of places are friendly to practitioners. And it was a really, I think, developmental and supportive space. And so that publishing process, it felt very collaborative, and was really exciting again to work on like a book review or a brief together that was focused on practitioners as a first few steps for me for publishing.
Great, thanks so much, Samantha. And if I can pose the same question to Becca.
Yeah. As I said, I'm the director of the Critical Language Scholarship Program. It's 20 years old, and we operate on a cycle. So the easiest thing for us to do is be like, let's start with like the application from last year and then edit. Let's start with like the handbooks from last year and then edit. And a lot of people on our team have been there a long time, and we have, I think, and maybe this is also like academia can kind of be this way. It's like we have a way that we do things, right? And I think I am sometimes known on my team as someone who has an exhaustive capacity for change. And I wanted to spread that exhaustive capacity for change among my team. And so I organized a design thinking workshop for our team. And it was last summer. And it was really exciting. The question that we worked on a real question. And the question was, how might we minimize conflict in host families during the first week? And we did a whole like post-it notes all over the walls thing. And I think it really changed like the way that my team works. And it was very exciting for me to bring something that I think about all the time into my team at large. And so when I saw the call for pieces about uncertainty, I was like, oh, this is a great topic. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, so definitely what Samantha said, sorry, about when it dovetails with your work, it feels a lot less like an extra thing that you need to do. So highly recommend that. But the other thing I was going to say is for a very long time, I worked at Gallaudet University, the world's only university for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing. And I was definitely known as someone who presented about supporting students with disabilities in study abroad, working with deaf students, diversity, and I have published some pieces that relate to that. And so I think the GSLR is an exciting, like, little opportunity to, for me to step out of that and publish about something different. So I would also encourage folks to not be afraid to think, who am I to talk about design thinking? Well, I did a design thinking workshop with my team, and I think just like you are an expert on your experience, that's actually a design thinking principle. You are the expert on your experience, and you should feel empowered in that, and you should feel empowered in that to like submit to different publishing opportunities to talk about your experiences.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, I'll pass back to Melissa for the next question.
Yeah, thank you. So we want to make sure that we have time to answer the great questions that we've received in the Q&A. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I'll start with the first question. This can just go to whoever feels like they have a response that they want to share. Can you speak to the differences between writing for a scholarly audience and for a practitioner audience in international education? And I think you all have some experience with this question in one way or another. Does anyone have any immediate thoughts that they would like to share?
I'll just jump in to get us started, and then
Yeah,
Michael
thank you.
jump in too. I think if you are a practitioner who's navigating this, I think maybe Michael can speak if you're trying to do the other way, like just your research, trying to get it out to practitioners. But as a practitioner, I feel like my interest in graduate school was grounded in the reality that the problems I view at my work are really interesting, and I want to spend more time focusing on it. So it feels kind of like a natural posture. And was very much like with the empirical research and learning about peer-reviewed journals, like that was all very new. But I think in terms of, well, how do I kind of take this longer term research that I'm doing and say, like, what is the so what for the practitioner was really exciting and is kind of like how I framed my research anyway. And so again, it was looking through, like, for the book review, that's not my research. I am not someone who focuses on climate change or environmental studies, but is someone who is focused on global higher education. And so really trying to speak across these academic boundaries to be like, what can we learn from this? And that was really fun. And then again, trying to piece out like the in-progress research conversations of, I know people in the field are really interested in this, but they're not necessarily going to be reading like all the latest journal articles about it. So how can we write the so what? And I think what Rog does is really interesting, of writing these shorter opinions pieces for the public. And so I think starting to read pieces like what he's writing of how people structure, inverted pyramid journalistic style, like getting the most important information up top. And I think that's like how I think about it again, is like those more timely, time to the news, these new regulations that we're trying to deal with, like how do we speak towards that while keeping your longer term projects going, if that's of interest to you, which it may or may not be. But Michael?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And one thing I think I'd like to do is clear up a misconception that might be around that it's a dramatic change. And I think honestly, the two styles of writing are very similar. You're still backing up a lot of your arguments with literature and evidence. You're still potentially thinking about theory. You're still thinking about the methodology that supports your arguments. The trick is really just in terms of the proportions, because you're probably for a practitioner audience thinking more about like, how do I work towards those implications for practice? Whereas for a scholarly audience, you may be like playing around with new ideas for theory, or you may be like saying, look, the empirical findings of this study are really important for X, Y, and Z. And so, for either case, the biggest thing I think I can like probably suggest is just have colleagues in those fields read your work and give you feedback in terms of their perspectives, because they'll probably be the ones to tell you, oh, yes, this fits the type of audience that I normally write for. And they'll be able to give you little keys to just basically say, usually in my field, we say this and this rather than word it in this way. And really, I don't think it's a very insurmountable task by any means. I think it's just kind of an issue of audience.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Michael and Samantha were saying. I don't see the two kinds of writing as competing against each other, but really complementing each other. And you can still have that nugget of an idea serving different purposes, right? So oftentimes, when someone is looking to get published, that initial barrier of getting published, that's the big goal. That can be a little intimidating. Um, I encourage people to think about it as a series of smaller opportunities that compound upon itself. So these different kinds of writing, just the fact of how you frame the idea, and they can really help build on each other to help build your publishing career that way.
Yeah, thank you. Those are excellent points.
Okay, well, we can move on to another great question that's come up here in our Q&A from the audience. So the question is, what journals or magazines can we encourage our students to publish their ideas, experiences, or research? Now, that could be graduate students, or it could be college or even high school students. So I don't know which of you wants to tackle that first.
Well, I can speak on that again. I
Okay.
would say the International Educator magazine that NAFSA puts out, it's a digital magazine. It's a great platform for that. Absolutely. And yeah, just like reach out to us, if you have uh, some sort of unique perspective or experience that you want to share. Um, we are absolutely, open to hearing new voices, and those personal experiences that, is that's what makes up our day to day in the field. And then, on like a hyper local level, I would, but, especially, for like high school students, I would recommend looking into zine publishing, and like self-publishing the work, right? And just passing around your local community and, gain experience in, seeing, however, how small it is, seeing a publication through to completion. I think that could be a really valuable experience and super easy, just first step.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and add to some of the publication outlets that we've mentioned here today are what I would call maybe lower stakes publications. So, say like a book review for the Global Studies Literature Review that focuses on just one book rather than pulling together sources from a variety of academic journals and that sort of thing, like an essay would. There's no minimum requirement for education level for any of these things. So I could totally see an undergraduate student writing a book review. I've certainly worked with undergraduate students who are fully capable of doing something like that. The Critical Internationalization Studies Review is also a really good publication outlet to look at, because those are shorter pieces. And then the Journal of Global Higher Education also has like a practice focus category and a critical essays focus category, which are also shorter pieces, which are really good entry points to the publication process.
And I'll just really quickly chime in. I know when you're a young person and you're interested in the field, sometimes like this connects back to what Becca was saying. You're like, what do I have to say or offer? And you're unsure. But I think especially within like conferences like NAFSA and other organizations, it's really refreshing and fun to hear younger and emerging professionals thoughts about how we do the work. It can be like so interesting, or there's like new technology or things that people don't know how to integrate. And so I think they call them like service pieces in journalism, where it's very much like, like a how to, like a service of like how to access this or do this. And so if you're working with students who perhaps have like a really cool idea for a conference and you're like, wow, again, this would be like a great service piece for international educator. I think it doesn't always have to be like a huge research project. It can be like this practical how-to. And I think people really enjoy reading those.
Just to kind of add what Samantha, I think, highlighted, I think sometimes, it could be a publication even outside of higher education. I was sharing with some of our colleagues that when I came as an international student, I certainly was going and reading about different things and, I had certainly my thoughts to share. And, some of the earliest pieces were essentially writing letters to the editors. And even right now, I think, there have been times when I've, sort of published in certain diaspora media and so on, because I feel like sometimes in higher ed, we love sharing and talking to each other, but I think there's an audience outside of higher ed, which is certainly an important part of this conversation. And sometimes, there's some great publication opportunities outside of, those higher ed journals and certainly publications. So I think being able to kind of, find those opportunities and being able to share those experiences in those sort of publications would definitely be a good place as well.
Thank you. I'm going to shift us to our next question. I'm just mindful of time. I want to make sure we get to as many audience questions as we can. But our conversation also leads really nicely into the next question. So one really great way for students to get experience in the publication process is to co-author with someone, whether that's a teacher or a faculty member or someone else in the field, to get that first publication experience with someone who already has a bit more experience than they do. So question for our panel, what advice do you have for finding co-authors?
I'll go ahead and just kind of answer that briefly. This I think dovetails nicely with the question on conference proposals. One reason why you might present at a conference is it's a great way to get to know people who are doing similar work. You'll be placed likely in a panel with your presentation sometimes where you get to know people automatically that have a lot of similar interests. And you may find yourself wanting to publish together, whether it's an article or a full journal issue. So there's a lot of possibilities there in terms of finding co-authors. Also, for those of you who are enrolled in programs, start thinking about the colleagues that you may want to work with in the future. I try to encourage some of my doctoral students to work together like we did for this Global Studies Literature Review piece, because sometimes I see their work aligning in interesting ways. In fact, the first author of our piece hasn't really written for a global audience before, but she has written a good bit on equity-minded mentoring. So that piece fit well with a couple of the other authors who have done a lot more work in the international student support space. So there are, kind of strategic ways you can think along those lines to start at least building up a pool of people that you would co-author with. But also, if you go to conferences and you see someone and you read, let's say you read the work of someone that you really admire, it doesn't hurt to send them an email a few weeks ahead of time and say, would you like to grab a coffee? Because sometimes they may also want to learn from you. I learn as much from my students secretly as perhaps they learn from me, because if not more, because they do have that practitioner experience and they keep me grounded a lot of times when I don't actually know what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
I'll chime in that I have one co-author who we work with at Northwestern on the same program. And it's been really nice because writing can sometimes feel very solitary. So it is really fun to work with another person, especially if they have different areas of expertise than you do, and you can bounce ideas off of each other. And so I think starting small to see how that collaboration looks and, make sure you all work really well together. It is super rewarding. So starting small with someone you think you could vibe with is worthwhile.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to move on to the next question then, unless anyone else wants to add anything on that. Okay, so the next question to all of our panel is, how do you manage to balance issues of academic freedom with your desire to publish meaningful scholarly work?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this as a group, and I'll answer this maybe with Michael because it's a great question after our previous conversation about co-authors. But it is really interesting. We've been talking about how do you select an audience and publications, and with different audiences and publications, it's like, is that very internal to our field? Are you trying to speak to broader publics? And just with how politicized our field is, those are all considerations you're making when doing that. And there's so many different strategies that we might be able to like quickly chime in on and talk about more later. But Michael brought up that that's where co-authoring can be really helpful, and that can be co-authoring of people who are in different locations than you, like types of institutions or states or countries, or just different positions within the university. So you feel like you have broader coverage there. And then I would also say, again, the editorial process is so wonderful because sometimes I'm feeling very like fiery, and it's like working with an editor can really help make sure that those statements that you're saying are grounded in evidence, that it's connected to these different scholarly and practitioner conversations. So I think just working within a community on that. But Michael, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Sure. And thank you, Samantha. Those are some really good ideas and some nice points. Before I say anything, let me acknowledge I'm in a privileged space. I have tenure. Um, I have a lot of advantages being a white cisgender male because sometimes the stuff I write may not get the same kind of attacks as another person, especially in the public sphere and social media. I just need to acknowledge that because maybe some of what I'm about to reflect on may not reflect some of your experiences. And I'm trying to also acknowledge that I'm in a geographic space that while it doesn't have the greatest environment for academic freedom in Georgia, it's not Florida or Texas right now either, which I realize is definitely a space where it can be very, very dangerous to your professional career, maybe to publish some things. So having said that, um, I think strategically, you want to think carefully about if you're worried about something you're writing about, think strategically first again about who your audience is and what you're and trying to intend to accomplish through what you publish. Because there might be times where it's maybe not even the right time to publish something. Sometimes public scholarship in particular is all about timing, and people may behave very differently one week to the next, depending on what the current issues are going on politically or culturally or socially. And sometimes it's just beneficial to think about, like, well, this is an international issue, not just, say, a US issue or a state issue. So you may want to have that kind of international co-authorship to bolster your credibility along those lines. Like, I frequently think about publishing with colleagues in Hong Kong on issues of academic freedom, because then we're both kind of talking more globally. Whereas the implication may be, hey, you know what? There are also issues in Hong Kong and the US too, even if we aren't explicitly stating them. Um, and just to give another example of how this co-authorship can benefit someone, I have a fantastic former graduate student who's received several awards for her research and is mostly supporting students of color. And we've thought strategically as well, worrying about the fact that she works as a practitioner. How do we make sure that there's no pushback for her on some of the stuff that she publishes? So we have strategically made sure occasionally that, hey, we'll do a little bit of co-authorship with someone in California, or we'll do a little bit of co-authorship with someone in New York, because one way to kind of push back against, the potential for her work to just be diminished by saying, oh, well, that's only in this one space, is to say, you know what? No, look at this. This is somebody who's published a great deal of work in these other states, and this is more universal than you may realize in terms of this topic. So I hope that kind of helps in thinking about this.
If I may add, I feel like sometimes, writing for places like University World News or some of the other publications can be a bit more safer since your university president is probably not going to be reading all those publications. But I think at the same time, certainly this can be a sensitive perspective. I also feel the importance of the written word. And in the times that we live in, in international education, if we don't document and talk about these experiences right now, I think people might remember these times very differently. And I think that's where it's just so critically important that, while we balance those academic freedoms, but, both as practitioners and certainly as, academics, we take the time to, sort of highlight and, do the important research work and even publish that, because I think 5, 10 years from now, that's how we'll be able to, talk about some of the transitions and changes that international education was going through.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us towards our final question, which is a question for all of our panelists. You'll each have 1 minute or less to respond. And this is, I know you've all seen this question before, but it's, what advice would you give to someone starting out in the field and or wanting to share their work, ideas, and best practices with others, but not knowing how or where to start? And Becca, I'm going to start with you. So be thinking, I'm going to give my own answer first. So you have about 30 seconds to prepare. So the advice that I would give is to ask questions. So I know in the event today, you've had the opportunity to ask questions. We were not able to get to all of them. And I'll speak for myself and just say that I'm happy to anyone who wants to reach out to me after this event with their questions. I'm glad to chat. I'm glad to respond to emails. But there's lots of people in the field who have lots of publication experience, and they are generally happy to answer your questions. And you shouldn't be shy and afraid to ask those questions. We've all had them at one point or another in our careers. All right, Becca, over to you.
My employees and my students will tell you, or participants will tell you, that I am the queen of talking endlessly about the value of reflection. And I think reflection and self-analysis are what I would say are really important. I have a lot of staff members who are like 2 levels below me, who think I have nothing to offer. I'm not an expert on anything. And I'm like, did you evacuate a site of 25 people from Jordan and create a new program in Morocco within 4 days last summer? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, that is an incredible feat. And so recognizing the work that you do and thinking about what you are an expert on, what experiences you've had that other people could learn from, I guarantee you have something to teach people, So my advice would be spend some time reflecting and doing some self-analysis. I promise you have something to share.
Thank you. Gareth, would you mind going next?
Absolutely. I really just want to agree with what Becca said, where anything can be the foundation for an idea, especially your personal experience, no matter how small, it could be a new piece of technology you're using, if you're younger, or, a new approach, or just what you've learned from, your years of experience, if you're more established in the field. So totally agree with that. And I would also encourage folks to reach out to us here at Publishing Services at NAFSA. If you have an idea or just want, run it past us, see if there's an audience for it or something. A quick conversation can, before you spend weeks writing and building this out, could save you a lot of time.
Thank you. Rag, what advice would you give?
Yeah, definitely, encourage. Sometimes, I think on the practitioner side, sometimes there's a little bit of hesitancy that, certain spaces, may not encourage perhaps being able to share from a personal perspective and experiential perspective. And I think that's definitely evolving and changing. I feel like in so many publications and journals now, there's opportunities coming for, both sides. There's certainly a place for sort of, critical academic, research, but also being able to share that first person perspective, coming from, students, staff, and people working in the field. So taking that first step is definitely important. Again, it could be an academic publication, or sometimes it could be a different publication, outside of the higher ed piece. But yeah, I think it's important to be able to share that perspective. So yeah, taking that first step is definitely important.
Thank you. Samantha, what about you? What advice do you have?
Hey, kudos, love everything that people have offered so far. I think definitely, be reading within your professional organizations, to see like what conversations are being had, like what really gets you excited, where you would love to be in those conversations is a great first step. And I know for me, I mentioned this earlier about how writing can feel very solitary, and then I just want to make it perfect before anyone else sees it. And again, like these processes, these editors, they're all there again in support of the work. And so don't feel like you need to hold on to it until it's like bulletproof perfect. Like it gets there, maybe never perfect, but probably never perfect. But it gets there through working with other people. So don't be afraid to like be vulnerable in that way and just get started.
That's great advice. Michael?
Yeah, I don't know if I can follow up all of that great advice. It's really writing can be so difficult because it is so revealing, and because any kind of criticism can feel like a personal criticism about your beliefs or your intellectual abilities. And try not to take it that way, because very often if somebody's giving you critique, it's because they are genuinely invested in your work. And it's because they really do want to see it become better. And at least maybe they understand an audience a little bit more clearly than you do in that moment. So usually when I get criticism, I have to put it aside for a couple of days and then return to it, because I look at it with fresh eyes. And just as a final thing is the word that comes to mind in terms of advice is passion. Like, follow your passions. Don't follow necessarily the idea that you want to have another line on your resume or your CV. Because when writing gets really difficult, it's the passion, I believe, that will sustain your work and kind of drive you to the finish line.
Great, thank you. This is all excellent advice. Elia, I'm going to turn it over to you right on time to close things out.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So we've reached the end of our time. So I'd like to wrap up by thanking our wonderful, amazing panel today for being so willing to share their experiences and be so engaged. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I'd also like to thank our participants for posing great questions. And just a couple of deadlines to remind you of before we go. The first is, don't forget to submit your ideas to the GSLR, the Global Studies Literature Review, by September 15th. So the deadline is September 15th for ideas, and then full drafts are due by the 1st of August. Is that right, Melissa? Yes. And then we have another TLS Knowledge Community virtual event coming up on August 25th. So put that in your calendars. And I'd just like to wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here today.